Do you ever have to clean up so the cleaners can clean? Talk about first world champagne problems, but my wife just put me to work downstairs, cleaning up before the cleaners get here. Welcome back to the Run the Numbers podcast. I want to talk about some of the different ways outside of tech to make a buck in this world. There are so many ways to get rich and to be happy making money outside of just tech. I know I definitely lean more towards the technology tilt of things here. But, I had a couple of conversations recently that, like, really opened my eyes to other ways of building, like, empires, and I don't think they get enough light. We're gonna get into that in a sec after a short word from our sponsors, who are not the cleaners. Today's podcast is brought to you by Zenscar. Are you still operating like it's 2015? Data entry, spreadsheet calculations, and waiting for developers? A lot has changed, amigos. It's time to catch up. Zenscar is an AI-powered order-to-cash platform. Imagine having an extra pair of hands in your finance team. Sending a credit note? Done. Creating a report? It's in your inbox already. Wondering why your collections fell? Here are potential reasons why. Zenscar AI does all the heavy lifting for you so you can focus on what matters. Your customers demand flexible pricing options. Your sales team throws in custom terms to close deals. Traditional platforms force you to manual fixes, spreadsheets, or developers. On Zenscar, everything is on autopilot. Just send your contracts and usage to the platform. It automates everything downstream: billing, revenue recognition, collections, and SaaS metrics. It is everything you need to scale smarter without losing control, so you can do more with less. The best part? It works as an extension of your team. Hands-on support at every step of the migration, implementation, and beyond. Ready to leave behind the manual mayhem? I know I am. Step into the future of finance today. Visit zenscar.com/RTN and book a demo. That is ZENSKAR.com/RTN. ZENSKR.com/RTN. Check it out in the show notes and book a demo. Woo! All right. So, what I've gathered is there are a ton of ways to make a buck in this world outside of just slinging software. And so, I was sitting next to a CFO at dinner recently, and I asked her what her company did, just making like classic small talk. And she's like, "Oh, we're in the HVAC space." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. So you make HVAC systems that pump the hot or cool air in." Okay. She's like, "Well, kind of. We make just the small parts that hold the HVAC systems together." And I'm like, "Okay, so like the belts and the bolts and stuff." She's like, "Exactly." And so I'm like, "Okay, I don't really know what else to say here." I'm like, "Business doing well?" She's like, "You bet. We'll do about 1.112 in revenue this year." And I'm like, "Million?" She's like, "No, billion." What? Shut the front door. And so, like, at that instant, I'm like, I've done literally nothing with my life. You're selling the parts that go in HVAC systems, and you're doing over $1 billion in revenue a year. And so, like, if you live, eat, and breathe technology, I'm guilty as charged there. It can feel like software really did eat the world. Mark Andreessen was famous for saying that about 10 years ago. But if you zoom out, there's a whole whack of billion-dollar businesses that aren't propped up by net dollar retention dashboards or subscription graphs. They operate just like with real world stuff that you don't have to measure with these funky metrics. And they're just, more importantly, much quieter. And they don't have a Substack or a podcast like this guy. Now, don't turn off the podcast. This is not some like hustle porn, get out there and grind like motivational speech. I'm not about to tell you to launch a search fund and buy a retiring auto mechanic shop. It's not hustle culture tempting you to roll up local laundromats and leverage technology to improve EBITDA margins. And it's not because I don't think those are good businesses, but because if you're like me, you can't identify the business end of an Allen wrench. I'm really not handy. And I also don't think Jimmy from Columbia B School, who's 28 years old, is going to go like all McKinsey's way to a regional hardwood floor empire via spreadsheet. But I digress. I was at another dinner. I go to a lot of dinners. And I sat next to another CFO, and I actually recognized her this time. She runs a finance at a popular subscription dating app. And we started nerding out over retention, daily active users, churn curves, just classic SaaS banter. Classic. And she paused, take a sip of her Cosmo, and she said, "You know, it's funny. We think we're so smart with all these metrics. My husband and I met a guy on vacation. He rips and replaces dirty rugs in Georgia public schools. Paid himself 22 million last year. Ain't bad work if you can get it, right?" And there's this fantastic musing that's making the rounds. It's by Evan Armstrong, who has a great newsletter. And it's when God gives you a blank canvas, Why do you paint B2B SaaS? That one like really hurt me on a visceral level. Like all the things you can do and you choose B2B SaaS. And sometimes I wonder if the greatest trick that the devil ever played was convincing us that SaaS revenue was more noble, more scalable, more defensible than the alternatives, that it was, what do they call it? Infinitely extensible, whatever that means, with durable gross margins. And I say this as someone who benefits from this ecosystem and someone who has put those exact words on PowerPoint slides, even though I don't know what extensible means. But like, screw it. Like, I'm all in. So I'm just going to say the quiet part out loud that the SaaS model only works if you keep reinvesting. You do not get to build it once and sell it forever. And so there's this quote, that's the reason software companies are valuable, the zero marginal cost component that allows for uncapped returns on investment. And that was Ben Thompson from Stratechery who had pointed that out. If you really think that's true, just go back to bed. It's a fairy tale. You build it, you maintain it, you patch it, you rebuild it, then you build some more just to keep the customers from churning. And this is a quote from Ben Stansel. It's called "The Software Companies Actually Have Good Margins." You should check it out. He said, the uncomfortable answer, I think, is that software margins, and especially SaaS margins, are an accounting fiction. Software development costs are COGS, not literally, not according to the accountants, but in practice, if you can only sell SaaS software and retain customers by promising a steady stream of new releases, how are the expenses associated with developing those releases functionally any different than the money you spend on servers and support agents? I mean, he's got a point. Like, retention isn't free. It's funded. It's very much funded. It's propped up by R&D line items that live in OpEx, and they get pitched as these growth bets, right? It's all for future growth, even when half the roadmap that's in R&D is just fixing old shit we ship too fast. Yet we church it up, and Joe Dirt's like, don't church it up. Your name's Dirt, not Dirty. We church it up like we're death wrestling ogres. It's like that scene from Succession where Kendall's like, Shiv, we're death wrestling with ogres. And she's like, you're reading documents is what you're doing, Ken. And there's still real value in what we do. That is not at all what I'm saying. I'd rather close the books using software than an abacus. I'd rather ask ChatGPT for directions on how to stay in the back deck than call my father-in-law. I'm not questioning the innovation or the efforts, but we should interrogate the pedestal that we put our business models on, our business models. We are not necessarily smarter than the rug guy. We're just more convincing. We're more convincing at pitching the dream to ourselves, our boards, and the next buyer on the cap table. Because I've covered this in other posts that there's this next buyer angle to valuation. Because in order to keep the world spinning, we need to convince the next guy that there will be a next guy who thinks this business is even more awesome because it will eventually get to scale. And sure, some companies make the math work. They reach the promised land. Microsoft and Adobe got there. They graduated up and through Maslow's hierarchy of software needs. A handful of others, while smaller, they can be found under a Constellation software umbrella, quietly chugging along in some vertical SaaS niche no one else wants to touch. But most of us are still feeding the beast. It's like that meme of Daffy Duck and Looney Tunes just shoveling coal into the train to keep it going. And that's often what it feels like, shoveling spend into R&D just to perpetuate this thing we got going. So maybe the next time I find myself obsessing over expansion revenue, CAC payback, which will eventually maybe get better someday, I'll remember the guy with the rug business. And it's not to idolize him or to put down my own efforts. I do have a very fragile ego, if you haven't picked up on that yet. But it's to remind myself that value comes in more shapes than one. And sometimes the most durable margin, it's the one that doesn't need a pitch deck to explain. Well, it's been fun jamming with you today. If you could give this podcast 5 stars, it would mean the world to me. Apparently, it helps the algorithm pick up so other people will listen to my ramblings. And next week, I'll be back with a podcast that hopefully causes way less existential dread than this one. Keep on keeping on.